Hey, welcome to episode 1 of Life of a Failed Comedian. I'm going to be a host, John Ziegler. It's technically episode 1, but I recorded one last week, and it was garbage, so I tanked it. So it's like episode 1, 1.1. I failed at making a podcast about a failed comedian. That's how failed my career is right now. I'm going to have a guest. I'm going to have this young gentleman on as my guest, so I'm going to get to him. So there's 3 reasons I didn't want to do this. Part of me wanted to do it. The reason I didn't want to do it is people start going, "Oh, John, you're so funny. You're not a failed comedian." I appreciate that. Failed to me doesn't mean not funny or not talented. So that's not what I'm saying about myself. I actually think I'm pretty good at this, but it's not my definition of success. And we'll get into that. What is success? The other reason I didn't want to do it is I don't want people watching and go, "Well, I middle at the Elks Lodge in Yaphank and I'm successful." And I'm like, "That's awesome. You are then. If you think you're successful, you're successful." That's not my goal. The bar changes as you're in this longer. So yeah, 14 years ago, would have killed to be a middle at the Knights of Columbus in York, Pennsylvania. That was winning the lottery. Now I'm not crossing a bridge for that. So, and the third reason I didn't want to do it is I didn't want to come off as being whiny or bitter. I'm not bitter at all. I love comedy. It's my passion. It's the love of my life. But I'm 56 years old now. I spent the last 3 years fighting pancreatic cancer, and I'm doing fine. This is not a cancer podcast. We're not going to talk about that unless nobody watches this one, and then it's going to be a big cancer podcast probably, whatever I got to do. But so this is Nick Maloney, and he's a young comic that I know from doing the open mics. He works around the clubs around here, and we've met, and I ran this idea by him like a week ago. And he was very insightful for a kid so young, but we come at this from a very different perspective. I'm 16 and a half years in. I've been doing comedy all in since I started in 2008, and I'd say by 2011, this is all I did. So I'm interested. This is Nick Maloney. How old are you, Nick? I don't even know.
I'm 21. He's
turned. 21. So he just turned. So yeah. I'll be 57 in a couple of months. So I have, let's do the math. What am I, 36 years older than you?
Yep.
All right. So the comics I was growing up watching, he wasn't even born for like another 15 years. So coming from a Denver. And how long have you been doing comedy?
About 2.5 years. About.
All right. So I've been doing this 14, almost 15 years longer than him. When people say, "Give me a time," like I've been doing this 4 years, 2 years, like first year, for instance, how much were you getting up?
Yeah, that's the thing. If you go by that, probably, I mean, maybe if I got up 30 times my first year, that would have been a lot. I really think it was about like a one a month, sometimes twice a month kind of thing for the first 6 months to a year. And then, I remember I started doing this like I was in college. I'm still in college, and I wanted to just start while I was in college and then really take it seriously once I got out. So I was like, a show a month is fine. And then you realize, like, that's not cutting it.
When I started first year, all I was doing was bringer shows at the clubs out here. I'm from Long Island, so Governors are the clubs out here. I was doing bringer shows at Governors.
Yeah.
I didn't like regular open mics because I was nervous and scared. And anybody who's non-comedy, comedy people know. But you go to an open mic, it's basically 12 other comics on their phone, and you're usually in a bar or like a coffee house. You have people making frappuccinos behind you. The Met game's on. They could be pretty brutal. You're just there. It's like a gym. You're there to work out shit. But I didn't like that. I was terrified of it. When you do bringer shows at the clubs, it's a comedy club, so it feels like you're doing comedy, and there's an audience because people have to bring people. So I ended up running. I started by doing that. Years later, I ended up running for the brokerage. I ran their open mic for almost 7 years. Wow. For a long time, I ran that show. And there would be nights I'd sell it out. You're talking 185 people. Yeah. It was an open mic. So you can get some real stage time and get real feedback on what that's like. But my first year, I did maybe 12 shows.
Yeah.
And I told a guy who's a mentor of mine, who's been doing comedy for 100 years, I've been working really hard. He goes, "How many shows did you do this year?" I go, 12. He goes, "That's just enough for you to suck forever."
Yeah.
And I go, "Yeah, you don't get better.
No.
Or you get a little bit more comfortable, but like you do a show, and then you have a month off, and then you go back, and it's like, all right, this is like my first show again."
And that's the thing. The anxiety is ramped up every time. Because you haven't done anything in between. So it's like, it's literally like you said. It's like your first show every time. It's just. I remember thinking, like, I have to do this more just so that I'm not so nervous.
That's half the battle.
Yeah.
So same person. He's a bit a huge mentor of mine.
Yeah.
I was like, how do you get a manager? How do you get this? How do you do that? And he said, your first 1,000 shows don't count. And I was like, 1,000? Yeah. And then I was at year 4. And about year 4, I was hovering around 1,000 shows.
Yeah.
Because I went from like first year was like 12 shows.
Yeah.
Second year was 50.
Yeah.
I started doing a little bit more. And I'd say third and fourth year, I did like 350 shows a year.
Wow.
You know, so maybe I was at 800 shows, whatever that, I wasn't logging them in a book, but I was doing a mic every day. If you go to the city, if you structure them right, you can do 3 shows in a day.
Yeah.
You know, so you can really bounce.
So you're counting mics?
Yeah, well, that's all I really had in the beginning. If I didn't count mics, it was no shows.
Exactly,
I mean, the first couple of years. So I was fortunate is I got into a club relatively early to do like the weekdays, like the fundraiser shows. Yeah. So I was getting some pretty decent stage time. And then I'd say about 2.5, I started getting hosting work. I middled at 4 years in. I was featuring at 4 years in.
Sounds pretty successful. Sounds like a...
I thought it was, back then, I thought it was. I thought I was successful back then because the bar moves. Look, my goal when I started comedy, and this is what I'm going to ask you after this. When I started, my goal, because I was 40 years old. You started at like 19.
18.
18. So that's like massive difference. Like 18, I think I was playing cars in the dirt. Like I was like a child. I was a man-child. Yeah. All I did was play basketball.
Yeah.
Dream about what I was going to be, but it's so far removed at 18.
Did you go to college?
I went to Nassau Community my first 2 years.
Okay.
Then I actually got a scholarship, academic scholarship to Hofstra.
Okay.
Then I dropped out in like middle of my first semester because I got a job for CBS Sports Television. A friend pulled strings. And then I got the job and had like a mental breakdown because I had to go to the city and I was like such a sheltered kid. And somebody yelled at me like my second day at work and I just left and took a train home. I never quit. I just left the office and took a train home. Then I went back to school. I went to SUNY Brockport, which is upstate. I worked in a different field. I worked as an addictions counselor. Yeah. I'm not recovery. I don't even drink. I did that for 5.5 years.
Had to lie to get it. Had to fake an addiction.
Had to fake an addiction to get it. 5.5 years I did that. Okay. I worked at a teen inpatient unit for 5.5 years. And then I came home. Then I went to SUNY Old Westbury.
That's where I'm at now.
This is the whole podcast. It's just going to be me listing every school that I've gone to. I went to SUNY Old Westbury and got my teaching license. So I had a counseling degree, and then I got a teaching license. And I taught for like 2 years.
At a high school?
I taught elementary school. I taught kindergarten in Plainview, and then I taught 4th grade over in East Meadow. And I hated it. And then I quit that. Got a job as like a consultant, working for some company. It was like consulting. Yeah. We would supervise customer service departments.
Wow, that sounds great.
Oh, it was so exciting. I mean, it was customer service departments, then comedy. That was the order of the most exciting careers I've had. And then I went to California. I worked for a .com during the internet boom, moved home, started working in the fitness industry, which, look, I didn't love the fitness industry, but that's what I did for the better part of 20 years, because if you have to have a job, you wear sweats, talk about exercise. It's not the worst job. Like, I actually enjoyed it. It was okay, but it was still work. I started comedy at 40.
Wow.
I owned a business. I was pretty successful. I had a fitness studio in Port Washington, wealthy area, and I was training a lot of like celebrities' wives. No celebrities, just celebrities' wives, which I won't name, but like well-known celebrities' wives.
That's hilarious.
And I had this horrible feeling that I never did comedy, and it haunted me. I wanted to be a stand-up since I was like 10.
Really?
Like 10 years old.
I didn't know that young. It's funny that
I was watching Carson at 10.
Wow. That's funny because I started way before, like in terms of like way before you did in like life wise. I started 18, you started at 40. But to think that you were like deferring this dream for 30 years is crazy, because I really didn't.
It was torturous.
Yeah.
It haunted me there's not a day that went by for 20 years I didn't think about it.
Wow.
Like literally. So in I think it was 89. So I was like, I graduated high school 17, maybe I was 19, 20, like your age.
Yeah.
I did an open mic at Governor's.
Oh, wow.
Joey Cola, it's a Long Island legend, Joey Cola hosted it. It was like 1989. And there was 2 comics on my open mic. Young kids like me, like doing an open mic. It was George Gallo, which most people on Long Island know George Gallo.
Amazing. I was watching him last night on YouTube.
He was doing this crazy bit in 1989 where he was Herman Munster vacuuming. And he had like combat boots on and like lipstick and a wig, and it was so insane. And I'm like, what the hell am I looking at? And Keith Anthony.
Amazing.
And they were like young guys. And then I did that mic, and like you said, it was emotionally exhausting. I went home and collapsed like I did a triathlon.
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't go up again for about 19 years. I took a 19-year sabbatical between mics. So I did that one at Governor's, which I have a cassette tape of that show. I have an audio recording on cassette of that show, and I don't have a cassette. I haven't heard it in like 25 years. I have the cassette.
How many times did you play it in between the 19 years that you were off?
Nothing. I don't have a cassette player. That thing's been sitting in storage.
Wait a second. So that was your first mic, and then you took 19 years off.
Yeah.
And you just never like listened to it?
Let's see, 1990, and I started comedy in 2008. So yeah, I took 19 19 years off.
Between 1990 and 2008.
I never listened to it, I don't think.
You've like
Maybe in 2000, when I did it in 1990, I listened to
you
it.
need to play that for this podcast.
And then I have, from my grad shows, so I took John Truson's comedy class at Governor's.
Yeah.
And I thought I was being smart, I'm like, well, you can't teach you how to be funny. So I'm going to take the comedy class, and I'm going to suck up to this guy because he was booking the clubs. That was my plan. And everybody who knows John, you don't suck up to John Truson. That's a bad, that's a bad plan.
He's right through all of it.
So right through it.
Yeah.
So I took the class, and when I got in there, I go, there are things to learn. I was new. I didn't know how to hold a microphone properly, understanding like word economy, like setups, get to the funny part, just basic
Etiquette.
timing, and it doesn't teach you how to be funny. You can't teach somebody how to be. I don't believe you can teach somebody how to be funny, but you can teach them how to write, how to have tools, how to perform on stage. There are things you can teach. I took the comedy class, and I really enjoyed having a place to go on whatever night it was on, Tuesday nights at 6:30. That I knew every week at like that time, I was going to have 2.5 hours to sit in a class with other people like me.
Yeah.
So you make friends through it and camaraderie. I took the class, and I worked really hard at it. Yeah. And that was my introductory. But then you do when you finish a comedy class, you have graduation shows, and John would tape them. Yeah. And this was 2008. We were still giving us DVDs. It wasn't digital. So I have the physical hard copy DVDs of my grad shows. And I've seen still pictures from them. I haven't seen the videos since. I probably watched them in 2009.
Yeah.
In 13, 14 years, I haven't seen those DVDs. But I saw a still picture of me. I was wearing carpenter jeans. Do you even know what they are?
I'm thinking cargo jeans. No.
No, carpenter jeans had like a loop on the side to keep your hammer.
Yeah,
in case.
Yeah, in case you just need a hammer.
My microphone in there, whatever I needed. Yeah, I was wearing. That's how old I was. I was wearing carpenter jeans.
That'd be funny if you walked up with your own mic.
My mic and my
unplugged theirs and plugged yours in.
That'd be fantastic.
You got like animal noises on it or something.
You know what? I'm bringing it back. That's going to be my. So I haven't. I'm going to have to get a DVD player.
Yeah.
And have it. So I have about 6 or 7 CDs at home. I took the class twice.
Okay.
So I have 2 from 2 different grad classes, 4, and then I just taped some early sets.
Yeah.
I was doing like open mics and I was taping. So I have those all on DVD, but it'll probably be cringy. Like, did you watch, we talked about it, you watched Sandler on Rogan, right?
Oh, yeah.
When they showed him at the Apollo at like 18, doing shows to him at the Apollo. And he was like, please shut the volume.
Yeah.
It's painful
to watch
so yourself.
Hard. I remember the first time I watched this is like a little fun story. After my first show, I'm a big fan of a lot of like writer comics, like very jokey. Mm-hmm. I loved Hedberg. So my first show, my hair was a little bit longer than it is right now. I need a haircut, but my hair was a little bit longer than this. I'm wearing like a black Motley Crue sweatshirt, jeans, Air Forces, and I kept looking down, and I'm just doing jokes, and I'm just like looking down the entire time. And a guy after the show was like insanely drunk, told me that I reminded him of Hedberg, and I was like, that's not what I'm going for. I loved Hedberg, but I'm like, I do not want to be like Hedberg. Because like Hedberg was on heroin. Like, I don't want to have a heroin stage presence when I'm like...
I don't think one's contingent. I don't think you have to be on heroin to be Mitch Hedberg.
No, you don't. But
he was a brilliant joke writer.
He was amazing.
The looking down thing you mentioned. So when I started, I was petrified of performing. Mm-hmm. Like paralyzing stage fright. Yeah. I know everybody's nervous. This was more than normal nerves. This was like, I think I'm going to throw up. Excuse me, my legs aren't working properly.
Yeah.
It was just anxiety all day. Somewhere when I first started, I was in between one of my 37 careers, I was working at Cablevision. And I was in training class. I was going to be an outdoor salesperson for Cablevision. So we spent 8 hours a day for like 2 months in a classroom, learning all about cable services and the competition. And obviously stimulating. But I was just writing, under my book, I was writing jokes and running over my set list, because that was when I was doing my open mic.
Oh, so this is your, like, in it? When was that, like 2009, 2010?
I don't remember. Right before I opened my business, probably.
Okay.
So like 2008.
Okay.
It's so vague. But I remember being at Cablevision and I couldn't even focus all day for the 6-minute spot I'm going to do at a Bringer show.
Oh, yeah.
So nervous.
Yeah.
But when I started, I had a horrible habit of doing this and looking down.
Yeah.
Because I had trouble making eye contact.
Yeah.
And John Truson told me, you can, like, it's a sign of weakness on stage for performing. Like, you control a room with your eyes.
Yeah.
So Tim Gage, you know Tim Gage, right?
Of course, yeah.
Tim Gage, when he was thinking of doing something, he would always stare to the back of the room.
Yeah, I think he still does. I still
Yeah, but it's
notice
good
that.
because the people in the back row, you can't see them. For them, it looks like you're looking right at them.
Yeah.
So they're like, oh, that guy's looking right at me. We can't see anything.
No.
So I started doing that a little bit to get me over this fear. So I remember I got like my first Thursday show at the clubs, which was like getting Carson calling you over on the couch. I got that, I got that text message or email, and I was like, this is the big time. I'm doing a soccer mom fundraiser.
Yeah.
It was the hugest thing for
Yes.
me. It was 30 years in the making.
Yeah.
Literally.
That's how it felt for me.
And Truson, the way he wrote me the email was, come down, do 6 minutes tonight. Don't look down. I can see you looking down even as you read this. And I was like, don't look down. Don't. So I was so fixated on don't look down.
Yeah.
And I remember my first hosting thing ever, I was probably 6 months into comedy.
And you hosted, like, for the club?
I'll tell you how what happened. So McGuire's, this is how long ago, McGuire's wasn't a governor's club
Yeah.
then. It was run by, he just passed away, nice guy, John Ryerson. He owned McGuire's
Okay.
before governors bought McGuire's.
Yeah.
And I knew the headliner.
Yeah.
And I went to the club to just kind of watch, and I was hoping to get a spot. So there used to be a guy who worked at Governor's. His name was Tommy. He was kind of like a manager, host. He like worked the front podium.
Okay.
Tommy was a good guy. And I knew Tommy because I took the class. I was around the clubs. And he knew the headliner. He called the headliner, and he said, hey, can you get this guy a spot?
Spot and hosting are very
So he
different
pulled
things.
me over to John Ryerson. He goes, this is John Ziegler. He works at Governor's.
Yeah.
You know the headliner, too. I don't want to say, he may not want me to say his name, but you know him.
Okay.
I might as well say his name now, but I basically almost slipped into his Irish accent. Does that give you a clue?
There you
So
go. Yeah,
Mick
yeah.
Thomas was headlining, but
One of my
Mick
favorites.
was only like a year and a half in the comedy. He was headlining. He was really accelerated.
He's so freaking good.
So,
He's so good.
we were laughing so hard because he brings me over and he goes, can you do a spot? He works at Governor's. I don't work at Governor's. I do bringer shows at Governor's. Big difference. It's the
Yes.
wording matters. You know what I mean? It's a little semantics there that changes the whole game. So he goes, all right, do 6 minutes. And he goes, you know what? Can you bring up the next comic? Like after me, instead of him coming, because John Ryerson was going to host.
Yeah.
And he goes, yeah. The next comic was Eric Tartaglione, which I'm like, it's a hard name when you're nervous.
Yeah.
Like, can I bring up Bob Smith? I don't want to bring up Eric Tartaglione.
Yeah.
So, and he goes, you know what? Just host the show.
It's such
So
a
I pulled
different-
Mick aside, and I didn't even know Mick then. And I was like, Mick, he wants me to host. What do I do? He goes, just ask people if they have birthdays or anniversaries. And I'm like, you mean talk to them?
Yeah.
I've never looked at a person in the audience.
my
So
gosh.
that was, I don't count that as my first hosting weekend because it was a disaster and I didn't know what I was doing. He threw me in.
Yeah.
My first hosting weekend where I was actually booked was Vic DiBitetto was the headliner. But it was before Bread and Milk.
Okay. Oh, so
It was before Sandy because that's when Bread and
Yeah.
Milk came out. So Vic was a polished, accomplished headline comedian.
yeah.
But he wasn't selling any tickets.
Yeah.
Back then, nobody knew who he was.
Yeah.
Nobody cared.
He didn't go viral yet.
No, and then he did Bread and Milk, and then opening the Vic was like, I'm doing theaters. So I went from like 50 people in the room
Yeah.
to we're adding shows,
Wow.
literally.
Wow.
So that was, I was very fortunate.
Where did it all go downhill for you?
So, good question. Maybe you should be hosting this podcast. So the shift changes. I was headlining at year 8.
Wow.
My first thing was McGuire's, Governors at McGuire's. That was my first headlining weekend. But then I started to get like City Steam. There's a club that was called Treehouse. Brad Axelrod ran a bunch of rooms in Connecticut. They're Connecticut
Okay.
rooms. He was booking Mohegan Sun at the time, so I was working Mohegan. I won a contest at Mohegan Sun. I was working Mohegan Sun. I got into the Borgata. Like, shit was happening.
Yeah. Just
And I thought I was I'm like, and I had a meeting with an agent, like in the city.
amazing accomplishment.
Yeah, it was all going good.
Yeah.
But there's something about the first 8 years. Again, it's not pre-internet. The internet existed, but it was pre-Reels, pre-TikTok.
Yeah.
So
Social
even though
media.
social media has really changed, like the last 6 years, really.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue like with Dane Cook, what he did with like MySpace and stuff like that, and email lists. Like
he was an anomaly, yeah.
He was an anomaly, and that's why a lot of people tried to discredit him because what he did was like, I mean,
brilliant. He was doing
it was
AOL
brilliant.
chat rooms.
Exactly, and like obviously, I mean, people like even Andrew Schultz are changing the game in terms of like the social media presence now that comedians have. But back then, literally, email lists were like dominating. It was like if you just had a way.
I used to gather.
To
it used to be called
communicate.
chimp mail.
Yeah.
And I used to gather after shows. I'd have a clipboard, and I would take emails.
Yeah.
I have like 1,000 emails. Yeah. I've never emailed anybody.
Really?
No, I just gathered them all.
I started one.
And then I tried to break them up by like region.
Yeah.
Like I had like if I'm in Connecticut, I would have like these people are in Connecticut. I'm not going to email them from on Long Island. I tried to like. So
That's
there's
smart,
a comic,
that's smart.
Liz Mealy. You know who Liz Mealy is? She's a touring. She's a comedy seller comic. She's touring. She was always ahead of the curve. Very smart, Liz.
Okay.
But Liz came up with an email system 9 years ago. I mean, now it's pointless because of Instagram and other things. But she was always way ahead of the curve. And I look at her career now, and if I go to Liz's page, she's got, I think, 3 specials out that all cracked 1 million views.
Yeah.
And she's doing, like, Edinburgh, and she's doing, like, USO tours. Like, she's all over the place.
Yeah, stuff most people couldn't dream of. And
she was always very smart.
yeah.
And I know, we were never good friends, but I know her, and she was around the clubs back then. I used to talk to her, and I was just like, yeah, I don't think I want to do that.
Yeah.
Like, there's a reason I'm a failed comedian. It's not like, it's not about talent or work ethic. It's about, I never assimilated.
I feel like we should get into that. Why do you think you're a failed comedian?
Well, we have to define failed.
Yeah.
Again,
which
for
I
me.
don't know if we'll ever do on this.
Well, it's hard to, it's because it's just for me, Nick. That's why. It's my definition
subjective.
of failed. So at 8 years in, I felt like I was where I was ahead of the curve for 8 years in. And far exceeded my expectations. When I first started, my expectation was all I wanted to be. I remember this. I remember John Truson asked me, and I said, I just want to be a middle act and open for like a famous comedian I look up to. That was my goal. Let me do 25 minutes in front of. But then I did 30 shows with Sebastian Maniscalco, 25 shows with Gilbert Gottfried, like 8 shows with Jim Norton, 8 shows with Nick DiPaolo, like people that I was like, holy shit, I'm with them.
Yeah.
I got to work with, I did 6 shows with Robert Klein, which was very sentimental for me because I used to watch Robert Klein's HBO specials.
He was
Back in the day when he was like up there with Carlin, and I watched him with my dad. It's a very big memory with my dad. Me and my dad's bond was comedy.
Wow.
And comedy, and he liked boxing. He wasn't a sports guy, but he liked boxing.
Yeah.
So we had that kind of relationship, where we were close, but it was never how's life, what are you studying in school?
Yeah.
It was more like, you watched Rodney on Carson last night? Like, that was our connection.
Yeah.
So I used to get up at 10, 11 years old and watch all those guys on Carson. And then in the late 80s, my dad died in 96, so we were watching Rodney Dangerfield had what's called the Young Comedian Specials, where he broke way before your time, but he broke Dice and Kinnison and Bill Hicks and Rosie O'Donnell and Tim Allen, and everybody broke off of Rodney's thing.
Yeah.
And that was like huge. If you got on that was game-changing. Excuse me. I got to open for Robert Klein, and my first time I brought him up. He dipped me, put his hand over my mouth and gave me like this big kiss on stage. But he, kissed his hand. But I remember coming off stage. This was like, I started in 2008, so it was probably like 2013.
Yeah.
My dad was long gone, but I'm like, that would have been so cool. My dad wouldn't have believed me if I'm like, Robert Klein just dipped and kissed me on stage. Like, it would have been, he never saw me do stand-up. My dad died. I didn't do stand-up until 12 years after he died.
Wow.
So, my mother did come to shows when she had my mother got Alzheimer's, but she had her faculties when she used to come to shows.
Yeah.
It was nice to have your parents be able to see you do.
Yeah.
It was my dream.
It's still like a legacy thing, and it's like, I'm sure, whatever you believe in, like, I'm sure that if your dad can see you now, he's probably very proud of everything that you've done, for sure.
It's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, I know, but...
So I think when it started, like, at year 8 was the golden year for me.
Yeah.
I felt like I had control of my career those first 8 years. I had this mantra. Look, people can say whatever they want to say about me. Ziegler, he's not funny. I don't give a shit. Like, whatever your opinions are of me, they are. The one thing you can say about me, you can't say I didn't work hard. Anybody who knows me knows I worked hard.
Yeah.
Anybody goes, he never worked hard. You're full of shit. Nobody believes anything you're saying. I outworked everybody, or mostly everybody.
Yeah.
I always had a notebook. I was always writing. I was always turning over material, and I was incredibly passionate about this because I love the craft of stand-up.
Yeah.
Stand-up is a craft. I don't give a shit about the TikTok sensation who blew up because he, walked around a supermarket holding his phone. I don't care about these guys.
Yeah.
If they sell out clubs, I do get mad. People shit on the club owners for booking them, and they're stupid for doing that because if I own a club, do I book John Ziegler? That guy's really funny. Maybe I want 23 people in here on Saturday night. Or do I put up TikTok guy who's going to sell out a 300-seater?
It's a business.
And then add a show. These guys are not just selling out. They're selling out and adding shows. So if I own a comedy club, or if I have a restaurant, whatever, a theater, that's who I'm booking.
Yeah. You want a good mixture of both.
You want a good mixture of both. So, but people get mad at these TikTok guys. I go, you want the guy not to make $25,000 this weekend
exactly.
because of his integrity?
Yeah.
So, totally understand that. And I'm not saying all of them are bad either. There are some guys, but the majority aren't very good at comedy because they haven't done comedy. There's one way to be good at comedy.
Yeah.
You got to do comedy.
That's
it.
It's like that with everything. It's really like that with everything.
Somebody gave me a great example once of like learning to play guitar. You can go in your basement with a guitar and take guitar, like just practice the guitar, and you can come out in 10 years and be Eddie Van Halen. You go downstairs, write jokes, and do jokes in your hairbrush in the mirror. You're an open micer.
Yeah.
Like you have to be in front of an audience to do comedy. And that's why I love hearing, that's why I think almost every comic I've met, headline, famous guy I've met, has been very cool.
Yeah.
They've all been very cool. Yeah. And I think it's because they all did what we did. They all go to open mics. They all struggled. They all did the shit shows.
Yeah.
They all did it.
It shapes you.
It shapes you
as a person.
When you finally get to do I've never met Nate Bargatze. I'm a huge Nate Bargatze fan. He's my favorite comedian. But I hear him on he does Nightland, he does his podcast.
Okay.
And he talks about these hell gigs he used to do, and nobody listened to the guy before. And I go, he does. So when he goes to do a theater,
he's ready.
Oh, he's not just ready, he's incredibly grateful. He understands what he has.
I see what you're saying, yeah.
Like, for me, here's my thing. I had a good show last night.
Yeah.
Nice show. A country club up in Connecticut.
Yeah.
It was after a golf outing. So they've been golfing for 7 hours. They've been drinking all day.
Yeah.
They brought me up after a video of somebody who was dying of a disease, and they're like, and now John Ziegler. And they didn't even have credits for me. He has funny things on YouTube. That was my credit.
I love how they do this.
And then I went up, and they were drinking and cutting filet mignons, and they just all were looking at me I bombed hard for 20 minutes. But it wasn't even bombing. I just heard somebody go, terrible.
Terrible.
And I did the old showbiz trope, which I hate when people do it. I did it. But, I mean, this was bad.
Yeah.
This was I was trying to juggle plates on sticks, trying to, anything to get their attention. And I did the old, these jokes worked elsewhere, folks. Oh, I hate when comics do that. And I did it. And some guy was cutting a steak. He looks up at me, and I think only I can hear him. He goes, "You sure?"
You sure? That's the best.
One guy told me he was going to kick the shit out of me.
Really?
Yeah, because his wife was pregnant, and I said, "Anybody here have kids?" And I go, "Well, you're about to have one." And I go, "Thank God she's pregnant." I don't want to make fun that she was heavy.
Yeah.
And he goes, "If she wasn't, I would have beat the shit out of you."
Oh, damn.
And you're at 4 years in, I'm just happy to be at the gig.
Yeah.
At 16 years in, I'm like, well, I'll be in the parking lot in 8 minutes, talking through your teeth. You're going to beat the shit out? Oh, really? Are you?
Yeah.
But you got to be professional.
Start going over your resume of jiu-jitsu and stuff.
Yeah. I'll start telling them.
Yeah.
I'm like, I was I was getting my second stripe blue belt. Yeah. Plus, this guy looked like he might have been able to beat the shit out of me. He wasn't like some guy. I was like, he probably would have beat the shit out of me.
Yeah.
So I think at year 8, the game changed. Because when you get to start headlining, a couple of things happen. Is one, your expectations raise. You start to look at what you're able to do, and you look at people around you that have better careers, and you go, and it's not a knock on them. Their career has no bearing on me.
Yeah.
But I can look at them and go, but I can do what they do. Yeah. So there's no reason I'm not doing that. Why am I settling to be an opener for Nick DiPaolo?
But it's like what you were saying with the TikTok guys who can't do what you do, that are selling more tickets than you.
So for me, and we're going to hold that thought because that is something I want to talk about. What got to a point is I felt like at year 8 to 10, I no longer had a lot of control of my career. Because now I want to headline. I don't want to feature. I'm definitely going on the road to MC.
Yeah.
But it's hard to headline because I don't sell tickets. So it's well, how do you get... So I felt stagnant. The other thing that happens is clubs like Bananas. Fun club. I can't go there to be a feature. I can't go to. I don't even know what they pay now. $125 to be a feature.
Yeah.
I can't go there to do that. Like the Stress Factory, they're not going to headline me. They book all A-listers. I love the Stress Factory.
Yeah.
So, Vinny Brand, if you're watching, book me. I will feature your club. That's how much I like your club. I would love to feature your club.
Yeah.
If you haven't been, go to the Stress Factory in
love
New
to.
Brunswick. Good club.
Yeah.
I don't have an ego. I mean, if
Yeah.
there's things on Long Island, the local clubs want to feature me, I'll feature here. It's 10 minutes from my house, my home clubs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do stuff like that. I have no problem with that. It's not an ego thing. But I can't go crossing 2 bridges and driving 3 hours to make, at this stage of my career, to feature. So you get a headline, but those headline gigs
Yeah.
become very difficult to get. And I understand. I'm not selling tickets.
Yeah.
Will I do a good job? Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, if you find that email list,
What's that?
if you find that email list that you have,
Of the 1,000 emails?
yeah, maybe
Nah, it's
you'll
gone.
start.
That's gone. See, I start
Maybe you
making
can start now.
Yes. My chimp mail.
Who is John?
And you know why I didn't mail them? Because I'm so bad with technology. I didn't know how to do chimp mail.
You really didn't?
No, I just threw them in a pile.
I started it. I think I have like 9 emails right now.
I shot
sent
my
one.
comedy special, and I opened my Instagram. 2 days after I shot my comedy special, I got an Instagram account. After I shot my comedy special.
Yeah, I remember that you weren't on Instagram.
No, I was
I
on
remember
anything.
like recently.
If I
seeing
stop
you.
comedy tomorrow, by the way, this is not this failed comedian thing. I'm not quitting. I'm not giving up. I will do comedy until my last breath.
Yeah.
If I have to do it for myself, if I have to do wherever,
Yeah.
I love it. When I say the craft, when I watch guys, I'm going to name some guys. That's like these are the people I look up. Nate, I've already mentioned Nate. I think Nate is brilliant.
Yeah.
Joe List, one of my favorite comedians. I think Joe List.
Hilarious.
Gary Goldman, fantastic comedian.
Yes.
Other guys you probably never heard of. Jake Johansson,
Yeah, you told me about it.
45 Lettermans.
So insane.
45 Lettermans at 5-minute spots. It's like 3 hours of late night spots.
And all of that, that is, if you are on Letterman for 5 minutes, you are killing for 5
Yeah,
minutes.
it's 5
It should be,
perfect late night
Yes.
minutes.
Yes.
Seinfeld said, I don't know if this is true or how he came up with this, he says a 5-minute spot on late night is like a 40-minute club spot. You need a 40-minute club spot to get a good 5-minute late night spot.
Yeah.
So if you have
that would make
if you have
sense.
45 of them, it's like how much material? Jake was brilliant. There was a guy named Tommy Jonigan who was a great stand-up, who I think is just writing.
Okay.
I think he's writing for sitcoms or something. I don't know if he's doing stand-up anymore, but
Yeah.
I watch these guys, and my appreciation for what they do, it's like when I see people who watch the opera,
Yeah.
or like they're just like, or a classical
yeah.
singer. Like I watch stand-up. Look, I hate to mention this as Gary Goldman's bit because he has so many great ones, but his abbreviation of the States is like the. But when you watch that 5 minutes, I go, it's a
brilliant.
pretty perfect 5 minutes. And
Yeah.
it's hilarious and original, and he has these tangents he goes off on and then brings it back. And when I watched it, I'm like, oh, he watched this documentary and wrote this bit. It's not even a real documentary.
Yeah.
Blows me away what he's capable. But
He's
that's
amazing.
my bar for myself. So success for me is twofold. Is one, I want to sell tickets not because I want to get rich. I want to sell tickets because then I can work clubs. I want to play the Funny Bones, the Improvs,
Yeah.
you know, the Helium clubs, the franchise
Yeah.
clubs, and tour them. I don't work any of those clubs.
Yeah.
You know, but I need to be able to have a name or sell tickets. So it's not so I can go get rich. It's so I can do gigs so I don't have to be dying at a golf outing.
Well, this is going to be it.
Oh, this is what's breaking
This
me?
right here is going to, I feel, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to post it on my story on Instagram. And people, you'll get like 50 views from me
Alone.
alone.
A couple of shares.
I mean, if 10 of those people share, that's another 10 views each.
Well, I do think realistically of what I have
Yeah.
to do, though, is like, people think, I always get advice from novices who aren't in the business, like, you know what you got to do? You got to put these reels up. I go, yeah, every comedian and their mother does that.
Yes.
It does work.
It does,
But
but
it-
it also doesn't.
It also doesn't for 98% of people.
Yeah,
For most, it doesn't. And for ones it works, they're not putting up a reel.
yeah.
You know who Jessica Kirsten is?
Yeah, of course. Hilarious.
She's such a great club comic. Jessica's got to be, because she was very nice to me when I first started, like middling, when I had like a decent 20. She would give me a lot of work.
Okay.
And great person, great comedian, but live, I hate to say this because television almost doesn't do her justice. She is a monster live in a club.
I've seen her live in multiple rooms. I saw her live in the Giggle Room at Go's.
When she was, which is an intimate small room for her, so she'd probably...
85 people?
Oh, she can see everybody.
Oh my gosh. I've never seen
Jessica's been
anything.
posting aggressively, podcasting, reels, YouTube, I mean,
Yeah.
nonstop, things in her car. It's not an overnight hit. She's been doing this for like 6-7 years.
Yeah.
And it's catching. And I watched her sell out the Paramount, and I see her tour dates now.
She was also on Rogan.
Did she do a Rogan?
I believe she was on Rogan maybe more than once.
But it's a well-deserved, and you're like, what makes you hit? Because Bill Burr, handpicked her and produced her comedy special.
Yeah.
And I don't want to speak out of line, I don't think it changed the game for her. I think social media changed the game for her because her crowd work is top-notch.
It's amazing.
And she would keep posting it. Like, that's why, like, I've become a very big Sam Morril fan.
Amazing.
Very big Sam Morril fan, because his crowd work it's never forced. He has some really good crowd work, and he puts up bits, which I like. And when he puts up crowd work, it's really good crowd work.
Yeah.
So sometimes I know people post a lot of crowd work, but I'm like, it's kind of weak, and it doesn't really tell me what you are as a comedian.
No, it doesn't
so I don't
tell you
care
anything.
about, like, oh, you made fun of that. Okay, did you write anything? So that's just me, and I'm never going to do that. Like, I am such a purist, and it sounds like a stubborn old man who's just kind of like, I'm not going. Yeah, and I am. But I'm going to be 57 years old, you know.
That's young.
I think I'm doing all right, but for the last 3 years, I thought I had one foot in the grave.
Well, yeah.
You know, literally. Yeah. So I was like, I'm not going to start doing this shit. I have integrity. This is the corniest thing ever. When I was laying on what I thought was my deathbed, I had a lot of peace in my life.
Yeah.
I'm not religious. I know you are. I'm not.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of an atheist. I mean, I prayed when I was dying, but I was just covering my ass. It wasn't real.
Everyone prays when they're dying.
Yeah, everybody prays when they're dying.
Everyone
and I was
does.
bad at it.
You know it's true.
It wasn't even good.
You're bad at praying.
I was bad at praying because I was lying, and then I'm like, well, if
You're
there is a
lying
God,
to
he
God.
knows I'm lying. Like, he can see through this facade. So I had peace in my life because I'm like, well, I got to do what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Wasn't super successful at it, but I got to do what I wanted to do, and hopefully I'm respected by comics. That means a lot to me.
Yeah. Well, you are. I mean, I can say, like, we were talking about me starting, and obviously we mentioned a lot of guys, Tim Gage, Mick Thomas. We mentioned a bunch of people. When I first started, I started out here. I was on Truce shows. I was just watching things. Those were the people that I looked up to, and I still look up to. And it wasn't like because they were untouchable or they were crazy famous. It was actually kind of the opposite, where I watch a guy like you, and I'm like sitting in the back thinking how lucky I am to see guys like you, guys like Chris Roach, guys that maybe aren't selling out arenas, but could. And I'm like, oh, look at the world doesn't even know what these people are doing day in and day out, just murdering show after show.
I think what changed for me is kind of what you just said, is you get to a point, 10 years in, 11 years in, I'm starting to do all right. Pandemic hits, but that affects everybody. Yeah. And then right at the tail of the pandemic, I get, literally 2021, I get diagnosed. So that's another 2 years we added. So it's like 3 years.
Diagnosed with COVID, right?
COVID. Late stage pancreatic COVID. So that kind of 3 years of, I wrote my special, the second half's all about having cancer.
Yeah.
And it's cool that I get to speak. Like, I'm doing something called Laugh Your Pancreas Off. This will air after that show. That's this Saturday. I'm doing the Trenton Thunder baseball stadium. It's like a 6,000-seat baseball stadium. Some Judy Gold's on the show. Mike Vecchione's on the show. Ryan Reese. Aaron Jackson is, and some other comics that I don't know, that are from like Philly comics that I haven't met. So always cool to meet other comics also. Yeah. I get to speak for Northwell Hospital. I've done some things for Lust Garden, and that's cool. But I don't want to be the cancer comic. Like, it's like, I get to speak and motivate people, and if it gives people some hope, that's awesome. Yeah. But I want to go back to being a comic. Yeah, I want to get away from the cancer shit and go back to my life.
That's fair, and I think you can do that because you have addressed it. It's not like you haven't addressed your cancer. Like you said, your second half.
Oh, I've addressed
special.
it.
Yeah.
Anybody with 2 ears, I've addressed it.
Of course, and check out his special on YouTube. It's amazing.
Getting my affairs in order.
Yes, but yeah, I mean. I know that we said we were going to do a relatively short podcast, but back to what we were saying, why do you consider yourself a failed comedian?
Because getting work now has just become difficult.
So that's it. It's the getting work part.
There's two things that make somebody, for me, my definition of success. Again, if you're working in the back of a restaurant and getting paid $50 and they paid you in spaghetti and meatballs and you're happy and you think that's successful, then you are.
So you're unhappy.
I'm unhappy with the level of gigs I'm getting. And I don't mind doing those. I do plenty of those.
Okay.
That's fine. Yeah. I don't mind going to work. I'll work any room.
Yeah.
But I don't want it to be like all I'm doing. Yeah. I want, you know what I mean? I want to be able to do gigs that are comedy conducive. For me, I'm a comedy club comic.
Yeah.
I love comedy clubs. I've played theaters. I've done 30 theaters probably.
Wow.
I've opened for guys like Bobby Collins in theaters. Not me, opening for people who do theaters, but I've been in the theaters. I'm smaller theaters here on Long Island. I've done most of the Long Island theaters, which are more like 400 seaters. The Music Box, the Borgata, is like 1,000.
Okay.
Patch Hog, I've done like 4 times. That's like 1,000.
Yeah.
But then I've toured with Bobby Collins at 1,500, 2,000 seaters.
That's insane.
I did the Wilbur Theater with Jim Brewer, which is like 2,000 seats.
And you
cool
were
stuff.
on Brewer's podcast.
Yeah, but Jim had me on, which was really nice because he saw my story.
Yeah.
And the way he got it is, Brian McKenna is one of my closest friends. Brian's been touring with Brewer for like 6 years. And he plays my doctor in a sketch. And he was watching it on his phone, and Brewer looked over and goes, "What's that?" And he goes, "My friend John Ziegler, he's got cancer. I don't think he's going to make it." And Brewer goes, "Have him on my podcast." Because Jim's wife was like stage 4 cancer.
Wow.
And they put her on a trial, and it worked, and she's doing well as far as I know. But he had me on, and I thought I was doing like a segment, like I was going to come on for 6 or 7 minutes. And he watched my special. He had me on for did a whole 45 minutes with me and talked about my joke. Like, it was really flattering that he took the time to do that. I have trouble getting work. So for me, success is I want to be able to work.
You want to be a working
I want to be a working
headliner.
touring comic.
Yeah, headliner specifically, right?
I'd like the headline.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But it can't just be headlining if I'm not proud of what I'm turning out. The art comes first for me. As corny as that sounds, the art comes first.
Well, it's not corny, and I don't think that you would ever do something on stage that you're not proud of.
No, I don't have it in me.
So I don't think you're going to just pump out material to pump out material.
So, like, if I was selling out the Paramount and I had to look in the mirror and go, ugh, like what I'm doing, that's not success to me. I don't care about how much money I'm making. It was my saving grace on my deathbed when I was telling you about my fake prayers. I felt good that I hoped, I don't know this, you never know. I was like, I hope comics think I'm a good comic. That means a lot to me. The opinion of comics that I respect, if they come up and go, that was really good, man, really funny. It means the world to me.
Yeah.
I have voice messages from comics that I've saved over the years.
Wow.
How bad is that?
How gay is that?
How gay is that? It's pretty gay. So I do, but I have voice messages of people who were like, "Dude, I watched your special, blah, blah, blah." It means the world to me.
Yeah.
I like money, don't get me wrong. I'd like to be able to make money and be this, but that's not my driving force.
Money and fame, I personally believe, cannot be your driving force. You'll quit. If money and fame are all that you're in it for, you will quit before you ever see any of it. Because it takes so long in comedy to, if you ever even get it, to get it. So, like, if that's why you do it, you'll do it for a year.
And I do like talking to young comics. Look, I understand where I'm at in my life, and I see a guy your age, a guy 21,
just murdering
22,
every show that he's ever done.
it.
Yeah, amazing. Great kid.
I see the stories. So I do like talking to young comics like that because I was lucky enough to have a bunch of people like that.
Yeah.
I know other comics have no guidance, and they're kind of funny people, but they don't know what they're doing, and they have nobody guiding them. I was lucky that I had Chris Montes and Joe Starr, who you don't know, he moved away, and guys like Chris Monte and DeVito and John Truson and Tim Crumpier and all these guys who have been doing this and headlining already. They all were good to me in their own way. Not warm and fuzzy.
No.
But now all those people
I know
I
all
mentioned,
of those guys.
all those
to a
people
certain
were
degree.
invited to my wedding, by the way. Like, it went from them being like, "Oh my God, that's so and so," so they came to my wedding. So it's like it was cool to get a seat at the table, which is kind of what I want. Like, I'm not a cellar comic. I've never played the cellar, but I go to the cellar. I'll hang upstairs, and I know a lot of people I know a lot of people on the shows. But you just want to have a seat at the table. You want to be one of the guys.
Yeah.
Girls. You want to be over there.
But you see, that's 90% of what you're saying is like why we do it is for the art and for like the hang. A lot of the times, the reason why people are comedians is they don't want to work a job. They don't want to have a boss. They don't want to,
Is that what you think it is? They just don't want a real job?
I think a lot of people do comedy just because they don't want a real job.
Yeah, those people are probably not going to be very successful, I would think.
No, but
I think comedy is a huge sacrifice.
It is.
Massive. What I gave up to do comedy,
Yeah.
I didn't go to my own brother's wedding because I had a firehouse gig.
Yeah, and how'd that go?
My family was so supportive.
But how was the show, I'm saying?
It's fine. It's a firehouse gig, But at that time, that's what I mean by the bar changes. When you're 4 years in, yes, thank you.
Yeah.
When you're 12 years in, I'm not sure. When you're 16 years in, you're like, that's insulting to me. I'm not doing that. Comics are not created equal. I talked about this with a comic I really admire, who's I think he's one of the best 10 comics in the country. It's my personal thing. And I talked to him about it, and we talked about comics have a skill set, and you develop a skill set over years.
Yeah.
What did we talk about? Louis was on Theo Von, and he goes, how long have you been doing this? Theo goes, 18 and a half years. He goes, oh, wait till you hit 23.
Yeah.
You'll really click. Like, this takes a long time. Seth Rogen had the best quote on, he did Comedians in Cars.
Okay.
And it's not his quote. He took it from a boxer, something a boxer said.
Okay.
And he said, Seinfeld said to him, didn't you move to L.A. to be like a comedian? And he goes, yeah. And he goes, what happened? And he goes, I moved to LA because I thought I wanted to be a comedian. He goes, then I met a couple of guys who really wanted to be comedians.
Yeah.
And he goes, oh, like this is what it takes?
Yeah.
It's something a boxer said. I thought I wanted to be a boxer.
Yeah.
And then I met some guys who want to be boxers, which means don't eat this, road work 5 hours every morning, gym, sparring, rest, do it all over again.
Yeah.
A lot of people want to be comics. They want the end result. They all want to play the theater. They all want to be at the clubs. Everybody wants that. You got to do the shit.
Yeah.
That was the fun for me. The fun for me was watching me and a few people, some drop off, go by the wayside, some don't develop, but me and a few people develop together.
Yeah.
I've never had jealousy or envy in comedy.
Yeah.
I see that. I don't understand. I pull for everybody who works hard.
Yeah.
Like, Tim Dillon started, he's a Long Island guy. Tim Dillon started
Amazing.
around the same time I did. We used to do a mic at Wild Child Tattoo. And I was friendly with Tim. You know, he would I would book shows and have him open for me or come and do a spot on the show. And we were all new.
That was his first mic, right? I think he talks about that.
It was a lot of our first mics. It was called Wild Child Tattoo.
Yeah.
And it had a little cafe area. But if you bombed, you can hear you'd be like, and you bomb, and then you hear you'd hear the needle buzzing in the background. But a lot of people, Dennis Rooney's where I met.
Dennis is amazing.
Joey G, who doesn't do comedy anymore. He's married with kids. Really funny guy, Joe Giordano. Really funny. There was a lot of us there. It was more seasoned comics would come. And Tim started hosting there, but I'd probably been doing comedy a year longer than Tim.
Okay.
So I was already doing some stuff when he came around. But I watched his success, but it's not a shock. He sacrificed and worked his ass off.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't like he was an overnight sensation. I mean,
no. And really, none of them are. Even the people who are like Matt Rife, overnight sensation. Matt Rife's been doing comedy
14 years.
Yeah. Like
killing himself.
Yeah. It's not a shock. The people that it's a shock, they fall apart. They don't really.
You got to work hard. It just takes hours and hours, and I still do that.
Yeah.
It's harder because I'm kind of like, what am I doing sometimes? You know, I'm sitting in an open mic on a Thursday night in a bar at 56 years old after headline, and I'm like, what am I doing? But I want to work new material, and I want to get better. And it is a challenge for me.
Yeah.
Is I want a new half.
Yeah.
My special had a new half in it.
Okay.
Probably about 30 to 35 was new material for my special. I'd like to, I'm not right in the volume of Burr and Louis. I can't turn out an hour every 13 months.
Well,
One, I'm not as good as them. I don't have the time as them. I also don't have the stage time. Opportunity helps.
Yeah.
I can't walk into Gotham and be like, yo, can I run an hour tonight?
Yeah, no.
I have to go to a coffee house.
Rogan was talking about, I think it was on that Adam Sandler interview or something, about doing 6 or 7 hours a week.
And he said, it helps me because I own a club.
Yeah.
So he's doing the mothership. It was like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. He's doing an hour twice a night.
Yeah.
So he's doing 6 hours a week. I don't have that option.
That's not like.
So.
I could never. I could literally. There's not a way for me to possibly do 6 hours of stand up in a week. At this point.
I don't want this to run super long, so we're going to wrap soon. But
All right.
I just let it go. Whatever it is, it is. So what is your definition of success? Like, you were telling me you think I'm successful.
I do. I understand why you think you're not successful, which I get that. For me, I think success is making jokes work. I think that it's being able to kill every time or close to every time. Like, to be consistent, to be original, and to be funny. Those are my standards for success. Mainly originality and mainly being funny. Anyone can be funny doing other people's material.
Yeah, that don't count.
So you're not funny if you're doing other people's material.
You're a thief.
You're a thief. So if you are original, funny, and consistently funny, consistently making new jokes, and not just doing the same act for 30 years, you are successful, in my opinion.
Oh, it's a good definition. And the way I look at it is I feel like I can do those things. And I hate to say that because it sounds like you're being braggadocious, sitting here like, But what I'm saying is, like, if it's not being recognized, if you can't work a lot, if people don't know who you are, it's a tree fell in a forest. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I think it's like grade levels, right? Like, for me, I'm trying to get to the point where I'm, a consistent host, whatever. That's my thing in this stage of my career. And that's like maybe entering elementary school. And then once you get to middle school, it changes. And now you have to make new friends again. Now you have to...
You know what's such a great analogy, what you're saying? So you do jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
I can't do it anymore. Cancer. But you start as a white belt.
Yes.
Don't you feel the parallels between comedy and jiu-jitsu?
100%.
Like when I went into jiu-jitsu, I was already headlining clubs.
Yeah.
And I was like, but I started as a scared open micer. And I went into jiu-jitsu, and I was scared in jiu-jitsu. I never wrestled in high school. I was older. I'm like, I'm not an alpha. I'm not like a great athlete. I went in there, and I was nervous, but it reminded me so much, of open mic days.
Yeah.
And a black belt came over to me my first day. And he goes, new? I go, the fact that I couldn't tie my belt on my gi probably gave it away.
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
And he goes, you know the difference between a black belt and a white belt? And I go, no. He goes, black belts just kept coming back.
Yeah.
That was it. And I'm like, oh, it's just time. You got to keep doing it. You can't quit. You can't get frustrated. So I think it's cool that you also do jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Because I feel the parallels between the two.
Yeah.
And I've seen guys, it's the same thing with comedy. I'd like to end with this. It's hard to say, you can become a little egotistical when you're a comic. Not in a bad way. I mean, everybody I meet now is a comedian. Mm-hmm. It's like everybody and their mother. I used to feel so special as a comic 10 years ago. Because people, what do you do? I go, I'm a comedian. They go, oh my God, that's amazing. Like, you work at clubs and stuff? I go, yeah. Now people go, you're a comedian. They go, my niece is a comedian. And you don't feel like, I feel like, well, everybody's just, I'm a comic. When I was in high school, which is the 80s, I was the only person in my high school that even had an aspiration of being a comedian.
Yeah.
There's nobody. They did a study recently of high school kids, what they want to be. 40% of high school kids want to be influencers. So, like, everybody thinks they're a comic. And if you have a TikTok account and a cell phone, you kind of are. So that's why I think I'm at a point now where I don't feel special. Maybe that's the word. I used to feel special being a comic. Now I feel like one of a million people. And there's no certificate. I don't get a patch that says comedian or I got a diploma. I'm a comedian.
Yeah.
It's an eye test. Like, how do you define a comedian? Like, how do you say, I'm a comedian? Oh, I'm a comedian too. I go, you've done 4 shows, but how do I say you're not a comedian?
Yeah.
Jiu-jitsu, I never took a test. I don't know how your school works.
No, I didn't take.
I went to Matt Serra's school, and my friend Mike was my instructor. He's become a real good friend of mine. But they would just watch. And at a certain point, at the end of the class, they'd be like, let's bring him up. And they put a belt, and they wrap a piece of tape around you, get a promotion. It's just they're watching you.
Yeah.
I kind of do that with comedy. I watch and go, that person's ready to MC.
Yeah.
That person's ready to move up to be a middle.
Yeah.
I remember my first, I'm sorry, go ahead.
There's a Gracie curriculum, by the way, for what it takes to be, and I think it applies to a lot of things in life. Like, to become a blue belt, you have to be able to defeat a larger opponent who has no jiu-jitsu experience. And if you could do that, like a significantly larger opponent with no jiu-jitsu experience, now you're officially a blue belt. We don't have that system in comedy, but you can see, like, the first time you said, like, any birthdays tonight, like, that's probably a stripe on your belt, because people don't understand how hard it is to look at the crowd and be like, what do you do? Like, that's a crazy, even for me now, that's a crazy thing to do.
Because you got a few people in the audience. You got the people who, some people don't want to talk. And you can sense, like, they don't want to be part of this.
Yeah.
They came to watch, they don't want to be part. Then you get the people who want to be part of it too much.
Yes.
And you can't shut them down.
Those
And then
are worse.
and sometimes they don't give you a straight answer. You're like, what do you do for a living? They're like, I do things, like trying to be funny.
Yeah.
And you're like, all right, just move on.
Yeah.
So there is a skill set to dealing with the crowd. That's a whole episode in itself, is crowd work.
Yeah.
So for yourself, you're 21, just turned. You've been doing this for like 2.5 years. What would be success for you? Like, you fast forward, you're 16 years in. I wonder if you'd be telling me I'm successful now if you have my career in 16 years. That's what, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You're looking at this from a very different. So I wanted to have you on, is different places.
So there's times where I feel like if I quit tomorrow, I've already done more than I ever thought I would.
It's a great attitude. Yeah.
Truthfully, I've met legends. I've hosted for people.
I put my shoes on the same as you do.
Yeah.
Please, legend.
But
Go ahead.
no, I mean I've met good comics and I've met legend. No, I'm just kidding. But realistically, there's times where I think like, oh, if I quit tomorrow, I've done so much. And I really haven't done a lot in comparison to you. I mean, opening for Maniscalco, doing all the stuff that you've done. That's why a part of me goes, oh, I mean, you've had a great career, even if you quit tomorrow. And you have a special, and like you've a lot of.
See, I won't even call my special a special because I self-produced it. So
still,
I recorded a very well professionally recorded set, and I posted it. For me, a special is when Netflix hands me a fat check.
Yes, and that's a fair thing to say. I criticize myself, so I'm biggest
very hard
critic.
on myself.
And I think that's good. That's honestly, like, that's why part of me doesn't want to correct you. Because you should have that fire under your ass the entire time of like, no, I'm not doing good enough. You're never doing good enough. But, so you have to have both. Like, I think to myself, if I quit tomorrow, great, I did great. But I also think that if this is all that I do, yeah, that kind of sucks. Like, if I continue my life, I will always have that regret of, oh, I could have done more if I stopped. So there's a little bit of both where I think my version of success would be, you know, to just do the things that I actually set out to do continuously. And wherever I land, I land. I would like to produce a movie one day or have a film that gets picked up.
You're so much more well-adjusted than I am. You're 21, son of a bitch.
Well, I would love to have like...
I almost died a year ago, and I still have a horrible perspective. I'm like, I don't have a Netflix. You'd think I would have some kind of perspective.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, I want to do all those things. I would love to have a couple $1 million and retire my mother. It's a great dream of mine. If I don't do it, I'm not going to be like, I'm a nothing, I'm a nobody.
No, it's a healthy attitude. It's smart, yeah.
It's a little bit of both. You just have to be truthful with yourself.
So the purpose of this podcast, it hasn't changed too much. It started off because I was just down on myself and down on comedy, and I wanted to talk, and maybe it would help some newer comics or help other people. I think if people would chime in with their definition of success and what they do. But I know I'm going to get people, John, you're so funny, you're so good. I'm going to get those. I'm going to get people who's like, I do this, and I'm very talented. I go... And good for you. If you believe, then you are. And again, some of the best comics I know, nobody's heard of them.
I agree.
Literally. I know
agree.
2 guys who are Long Island guys that I think are brilliant. And nobody knows who they are.
Yeah, I know a guy, John Ziegler, who's hilarious. No.
So I want to do this podcast and have on guests to hear their different perspectives. Because I know guys who are very, to my eyes, they're successful. But I know they don't think they're successful still. So it's like... Where you are in comedy to me, I am in comedy to them. So I'm looking at them like... So I don't know, as you move up, the bar keeps moving with you. But at a certain point, how do you be grateful? You know, you have to be appreciative for what you have. And I work on that daily because of what I've been through. I try to never be like... I should wake up every day grateful that my feet hit the goddamn ground and that I'm not sick. And I have to work on that. Yeah. It shouldn't take this much work, but I have to literally work on it every day because I get caught up with bullshit. Like before this podcast, I was eating an egg sandwich, like egg and cheese on a bagel. There was a year I couldn't eat. For a year. I would get sick. I was on chemo. I had stomach surgeries. They rewired me, and I couldn't eat food, and I love food. And I stopped and kind of reset myself, and I go, it's a good day. It's sunny out. I'm doing a podcast. I'm eating an egg sandwich. It doesn't last. So my goal is to have other comics on in the future to talk about this kind of stuff, get their perspective. Yeah. And if nobody watches this, it sucks. But if I get therapy out of it and it helps me stop hating my career and my life, then it was worth it. But thank you.
Thank you for having
Nick
me on.
Maloney,
It's an honor.
And I'll see you next week. Thank you, guys.